Hi, guys. Well, Saturday already. That week sure flew by, didn't it? Big happy Independence Day to all my friends in the U.S. I hope that you're having a fabulous day and that you're spending it with the most important people in your life. Now that a lot of those restrictions have been lifted, we can start to get back to something resembling normal. So today we are painting the Whine cellar. I thought it was oddly appropriate. so, so we're going to had a little technical glitch there, so you probably heard me twice. So we're going to get started on our wine cellar piece. We're going to have some fun with this. We're doing a little bit of stenciling. We're doing a little brush lettering, and I'm going to show you a really cool, really fun way to paint some really luscious looking grapes. So let's get started. So this is the piece that we're working on. I love this piece. I like grapes. They're fun, they're colorful, they're luscious. I love a great background, and you know that I love some brush lettering. So we're going to work on this today. The first thing that we're going to work on is developing this background. And oddly enough, starts with a really bright red on the background. Look at that. So we have this really great red. We've just put on 1 or 2 coats of country red. Neatness doesn't count. Perfection is to be avoided at all costs. If this were utterly perfect, you're never going to see it anyhow by the time we're done. So we're going to start with a stencil, and the one I'm using is Baroque Background is the name of the stencil. It's available on the website. We're going to start with this one and with Dacowart's Extreme Sheen 24 karat gold. I love this metallic paint because you really don't need a lot of it to get a really great result. So we'll start with the 24 karat gold. And we're going to work with the Dynasty Stencil Pro stencil brush. This is a synthetic stencil brush. The traditional ones, like mine, are made with a natural hair, a hog's bristle. This one is a synthetic. And it gives you such a beautifully smooth finish with very, very little paint. So we're going to start with that. A little bit of that on that synthetic stencil brush. You don't need a lot of paint. And let's position this stencil just slightly off the page. I always go slightly off the page. If you fit it in this way, it just looks kind of chunky and just sort of there. But if you go off the page, it implies that the pattern continues somewhere else. And as always, I always recommend that you tape your stencil down in at least one place so that it gives you a nice solid starting point. There we go. So I'm going to tape that in place so that it doesn't shift and move. Little bit of gold paint on that stencil brush. Remember to take it over to your paper towel to take off the excess. And then with a nice light touch, you're going to work in a circular fashion and change directions frequently. Just like that. Don't press too hard, there's no need to. You can just work in a nice, tight circles and change directions frequently. What this does, when I say change directions, if you continuously work in one direction only, the paint accumulates on the edge of the stencil and then eventually it'll breach and slide underneath and you will not get a nice crisp finish. If you change directions, you're going to get a really nice clean edge with no bleeding. So when it starts to run out, just reload your stencil brush, blot on the paper towel, and then go back to filling in the spaces. And a nice light touch. There's no need to work hard to do this. If you break a sweat, you're working far too hard. So I'm going to keep going here. This won't take very long. We'll finish this one up so that you can see how clean this comes out. And it's important that this is clean because you want the pattern to be crisp and visible, but not utterly perfect. Okay, so we've got color in. So when you remove a stencil, you pull it back towards you and away. And look how clean and how crisp that is. There's no major bleeding under the stencil. You get a nice clear pattern all the way through. That's important that you blot that stencil brush. It's just pulling a little like this, just to take that extra wet paint off the brush so that when you're working, you don't get gobs of paint and then you get a nice clean finish just like that. Easy peasy. Now, I've prepped mine ahead of time, so I have one ready to go for the next step. Right there. Look at that. Good to go. So the next step is actually to bury some of this. If you look at this finished piece, it's quite subdued compared to the original. And I'm going to show you how to do that. It's really easy. So you need your good old-fashioned ugly brush. Everybody has one of these in their paint bin. You know, it's seen better days, but it always works really well. And you need soft black. Soft black is the color to do this background. And you're going to dilute it quite a bit. You're going to thin that out so that you get sort of a milky looking glazy. It's about a 3 to 4 to 1 ratio. And you're going to pull that thinned paint over top of that gold and red. Just like that. And again, neatness doesn't count. We're just getting that to subdue that gold and the red at the same time. Now you can thin the paint with the Jo Sonja's fast drying glaze, or you can use water. It really doesn't matter. You're just going to make a very transparent wash to go over top of this piece. Now the nice part about using a thinned glaze is that I can get it as dark or as light as I want. So if I'm not happy with it, pardon me, if I'm not happy with it as is, I can simply go over it again with another layer of glaze. Just let each coat dry between until you get to where you want to be. Now, I like it heavily subdued. But if I tried to do it in one shot, it would simply become very dark and you would lose the depth. But if you do it in layers, controlled layers, you'll get a much nicer result. Now, there's nothing to stop you, pardon me, there's nothing to stop you from using a hair dryer or heat gun to dry this glaze really quick. I'm not going to do it on camera because it gets very loud, but yep, just a quick 2 or 3 coats of this will subdue that gold. You can still tell it's gold, but it's knocked it back considerably, and it does the same thing to the red. It subdues that bright red, and then you get this nice rich tone out of it. So we'll set this one aside to dry. I have one prepped for our next stage. So here's our board already prepped. And that just means that I have the line drawings in place. And then we get to talk about painting some leaves. The leaves are really simple to paint. They're just a simple base coat of the antique green, which is a fairly transparent color. So it usually takes 1 or 2 coats to get this in. But I kind of have a fast way to do this because I don't like base coating things. So I'm going to use just a small filbert. This one I'm using is a number 4 to paint in these leaves. Now I come up to the line, and I've talked about this before when I am teaching classes and in other videos, that I paint in the shape of the leaf. So if the leaf has a curve in the line, I pull the paint in that direction. I'm always keeping in mind the shape of the leaf. So pull that color in. We're not looking for opacity the first time out. It doesn't need to be fully opaque at this point. but it does need to follow the shape of the leaf. So I'm always aware of how that curve in the leaf is. So even though you're going to hide a lot of those details when you're base coating, I still put them in because it gives me a visual reference as to how that leaf is shaped. So then you get these nice bold shapes right off the bat. Now, I'm a lazy painter. I don't like doing things 2 and 3 times. So I really don't worry too much about getting them utterly opaque because we have so many other colors going over top of this that it doesn't really matter if it's fully opaque or not. Usually 2 coats is sufficient for what I'm aiming for. I don't like the leaves to look as if they're heavy or solidly painted anyhow, so 2 coats is usually plenty. Okay, so it looks pretty good. I'm happy with this. So, and I don't worry about the edges too much because the next step is going to take care of a lot of that. I've just made a mess. I got black paint all over one of my brushes. Dropped it in the handle first. I have a giveaway today. And as usual, Dynasty and Decor were very, very generous. So we have a gorgeous set of, these are Dynasty 400 series, the Decorator series brushes. Beautiful. We have 2 wonderful dome blenders, a small deerfoot, and a gorgeous mop. And then we also have a set of these glossy enamel daubers. And this is the kicker. We're using these daubers to paint these grapes. You're going to be blown away by how simple these grapes are to do when you have one of these daubers. So this is our giveaway this week. A great set of the Decor gloss enamel daubers and a beautiful set of the dome blenders and the deerfoot and this gorgeous mop from the Dynasty Decor series. That is your giveaway this week. So make sure that you put a comment in the comment section and share the video so that you get entered into that giveaway. Next up, so now we have that base coat on our leaf. I'm going to show you a really fun way to paint leaves. And it gives you texture and it gives you highlights all at the same time. So I'm picking up an angle shader and I'm going to tip load that as if I'm going to float. And I'm going to use Margarita, which is that gorgeous yellow green. And I'm going to cut into the tips of those leaves like this, as if I'm floating. And then I'm going to tap and pull back. And you notice I'm pulling back according to where that angle is. Remember that shape of that leaf. And it's going to give you a great little highlight on the edge of those leaves. And tap and pull. It creates texture and the highlight at the same time. Now it takes a little bit of practice to get this really smooth, but it works really well. So now I've got it on the edge of my leaf. I'm going to do the same thing on that curve, here and here. So I'm going to float a little bit down that line, and then I'm going to chisel blend back in towards the other one. So it creates the texture and a highlight at the same time. I like this technique. I've always liked how it looks. It gives the edge a little bit of a rough and less perfect look. And it also makes for some interest. Now I'm going to continue to do that on the other side here, but I'm only doing it on the edge. So it's a tap and pull right on the chisel edge. Stand the brush right on the chisel edge. So the float, that short little float, will give you the placement, and then when you tap and pull, it gives you the texture. So I have to turn this so I can see where I'm going. So, again, float at the edge. Need a little more liquid in the brush here. And reload. So I float at the edge to get the placement, and then tap and pull. But I'm always keeping the heel of the brush towards the center of this leaf. Just like that. And you can see that that leaf is really taking shape. Fun. I really like how this looks. I've always liked this technique for painting leaves. It gives them just that texture. You can almost feel the leaf. There we go. So we've got that highlight in. That was easy. I set that brush aside. We're going to give this just a second to dry because it's, if I go ahead and shade right now, it's going to mess up that great little highlight that we worked so hard on. Hi girls, I got some of my girls from Texas are here and from New York, Virginia, Brazil. Hi to my girls in Ottawa. Hope you had a great Canada Day. And girls out in Alberta, thanks for joining me today. Nice to see you all. And, we got some people from OKC, from Oklahoma, all those Okies out there. Hope you're having a fabulous, fabulous 4th. And to the gals in Florida, I'm hoping that it's not too hot down there because it's been hot and sticky up here. Not by your reckoning, but definitely by ours. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit. I love this little line here that comes down into that petal. I want to brighten that just a little float in there that comes up, and then I'm going to tap and pull back. So when I go in here with that gorgeous dark sap green or with plantation pine, I think it's plantation pine. Of course, it's the one bottle that I didn't put out this morning. There it is. So that's when this leaf sort of jumps. When we get that plantation pine shadow in there, it's going to look great. So let's look at that. So I've got some plantation pine. I'm going to put a float of that down the center of that leaf. So you can see that that leaf immediately changes the minute you put that shadow of the plantation pine down the center of that leaf. And I like having a little bit of that red show through. I'll show you why in just a second. A little bit of that red coming through the leaf will help act like reflected color because you're going to have a little bit of red in those grapes. So I'm going to remember we've got a little bit of country red in that background, but we want to brighten that a little bit. I'm going to pull a little bit of reflected color into these leaves with just a touch of Tuscan red. And I do mean just a touch. You don't want it to be too strong. So make sure you thin it out quite well. And I love a little touch of that red in the leaves. It makes everything pop. Oh, I messed up here. There we go. That little bit of red makes all the difference. Now, if you want to deepen that green in the middle, instead of adding another green, try pulling a little bit of the red towards the center. It'll give you great depth. And it really makes these leaves pop. I love a little reflected color in the leaves. Oh, hi, Bonnie. I can't wait to see you at OKC either. I'm really hoping that nothing interferes with that one. It's such a great convention. We always have so much fun when we're there. So now, you want to crisp up these leaves a little bit. Let's pull a little of that soft black underneath here, just to lift that leaf off the background. Look at this. It does two things. One, it gives you a nice crisp edge to your leaf, because this technique tends to be a little fuzzy at the edges for a bit. And then a little bit of soft black underneath here. Look at how it crisps up that edge. So fun. Now, I like taking the soft black and going around my grapes like this. It's like an instant shadow all the way around. This is just fun to do. And it gives you such a great, remember what I said about that, being able to adjust the tone of that background as you work. It's going to be able to, it'll give you great depth. I love working with soft black over reds. It's just such a rich look. So pretty. So continue around all of those grapes like this, around the line drawing with a float of that soft black. It'll give you a nice crisp finish in the end, but it also helps you maintain a little balance. So I'm going to do a little bit more of this, and then I'm going to show you how to paint these really luscious looking grapes. These are so fun. This is a trick I learned from Sandy McTeer. She, a number of years ago, I had watched her demonstrate this particular technique, and it was one of those forehead slappers, you know? It just clicked. It just made so much sense. So, okay. I'm just about done here with this. You notice I'm not really worrying about getting that shading perfect. You're going to do it again and again and again anyhow, but it just clarifies things really nicely. And then I'm going to show you how to paint these grapes, because they're just such fun to do. Awesome. Okay, grapes. Grapes are one of those things that, you know, they can be really tedious to paint, but I gotta tell you, I saw this technique and I thought, oh my gosh, this was just the bee's knees, the cat's meow. This was just the best way to paint grapes that I had ever seen. And you only need to have a few colors on your palette. So you're going to have some lavender. You're going to have some, this is the Deckwort lavender. You're going to have a little lavender on your palette. You need some soft black. You need some Diox purple. Now, I'm using the Deckwort dioxazine in the media fluid acrylic because, oddly enough, I don't have a bottle in the Americana. So I'm using that. And got the Tuscan red, the soft black, the Diox purple, the lavender, and lamp black. We need a shot of lamp black on there as well. And you need one of these. This is a dauber. If you don't have this type will work as well. This is the Pouncer, the little sponge ones. But I find this one works the best because it's a little more firm. And so you tend not to make them wonky grapes. They tend to be nice and round. If you haven't got one of these, you can also use these little finger sponge daubers. These are available at most dollar stores. They're inexpensive. Again, these ones work okay, but this one I find works the best for this technique. It just works. So it's as simple as this. Let's pull you up so I can see. And this is going to get a little bit wet with water, and you're going to pick up a small amount of the lamp black on the dauber. It doesn't need to be gobs and gobs of paint, but enough to fill it up. And you're going to start by doing some of these background grapes. And it's just press down, give it a twist, and pull up. So a few of these grapes that are back in the background, don't worry about getting them perfect. You're just filling in some of the background areas. Just like that. So we just need a few of these odd little grapes. So press down, give it a twist. That's all we need. And you need to do them in the black. And you're not going to rinse this out. You're going to go to the soft black, and you're going to pick up a little bit of Diox purple as well. So you'll have 3 colors on there, and it's just with the dirty thing. And now you're going to press down and pull up, and you're going to add a few more grapes, like so. Again, neatness doesn't count. Perfection is to be avoided at all costs. So then, once you've got those in, you're just going to press that on some paper towel to remove the excess. But then, with the dirty dauber, you're going to go into the Diox purple, a little soft black, and a little Tuscan red. So you're going to have 3 other colors on there. So dab them on the surface onto the palette so that the colors blend. And then you're going to start adding some of these grapes. So press down and give it a twist. This is fun. I mean, you can fill in this space fairly rapidly using this, but you're going to notice that some of your grapes have that glow, that little glow. So now we have Diox, Tuscan red, and you're going to pick up just a tiny amount of lavender so that you have all 3 colors on your pouncer. And you're going to tap and blend those colors and start filling in gaps. And that little touch of lavender is what gives you a great little highlight. And then you're going to do the same thing again. This time you pick up a little more lavender, a little less Diox, and a little more red, so that you have a brighter value on there. And you're going to start overlapping some of these grapes. And you'll notice that that Diox and the lavender, or the Tuscan red and that lavender will give you a nice sheen. It almost makes these grapes look translucent. And I just keep going until I've filled in that space. You get these really great, luscious grapes. But that little switch, that little twist, helps round out those grapes and it gives you a great highlight if you can hang on to it. There. So that's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with these. See how luscious those look? Love it. Easy peasy. Done with a dauber. Those are awesome grapes. So we'll set that aside. I am going to make a little bit of noise so that we can dry off these grapes real quick. Won't take long. Just so we can get you to the next step. There we go. So the next step to these grapes is so simple. You just need a good angled shader, a nice sharp one that gives you great floats, and then a little of the lamp black. So you're going to float all your shadows in. This is where you start separating some of these grapes. So just a shadow to separate. And it brings some of those brighter grapes forward, and it knocks some of the others back. So now you can separate them. Just like that. And again, I don't putz too much with this. I just make sure that the grapes that are closest to me are the ones that I shade around so that they pop forward more. Just like that. And it separates and lifts them off the surface. Easy. This is just a fun way to bake grapes. Certainly fast. So if you're doing a lot of pieces for bazaars or craft shows or whatnot, this will help speed up things a little bit for you. Now those twigs and branches, they need to be painted. I'm using just a mixture of antique green and the asphaltum and that number 2 rigger, and just stroke those in. And I use a little of that asphaltum or soft black to put a shadow at the back of that. And I keep it fairly simple. I don't spend too much time putzing with details. But that little bit will give you a nice little shadow. Easy peasy. So now we have to put a nice highlight on some of these grapes, and we're going to do that with a little bit of warm white. I don't use a ton, but I am using one of those dome blenders. So pick up a small amount of the warm white on that dome blender, blot on your paper towel, and it's done with a very light touch. You're going to just lightly dry brush. Of course, I said lightly, and I still have too much paint on my brush. Just lightly dry brush. There we go. Some highlights onto some of your grapes. And that helps pop those forward a bit. And be picky and choosy. The ones that are closest to you are the ones that are going to get the brightest highlight. And it'll bring them forward a little. Simple, yes? I love how this technique just seems to gives you the depth, it gives you the translucency that you see in some grapes. And it's just such a simple way to do it. Easy. This is just fun to do. Easiest grapes you will ever paint using that technique. Very, very simple. So, a few other little highlights you can pull in a little bit, you know, dry brush a little bit on the tops of these leaves if you like. You know, it doesn't have to be much, just to, you know, brighten things a little bit. And then we're ready to move on to the lettering. I'm not going to paint the entire lettering for you today, but I did want to cover a couple of really neat techniques for placement and for tracing your line drawing on. Because I think the minute you add lettering to something, if it is even slightly crooked, if it is wonky in any way, it can ruin all of the hard work that you've already done and detract from it. So I have a few little simple tricks for transferring lettering just so that you get it nice and clean and nice and crisp. So let me show you how to do that. So I have a couple of little tools that I keep handy when I'm doing lettering. And it's as simple as this. I cut my lettering down. So if I'm tracing lettering on, I cut it down so that it's more manageable instead of all being on one sheet. The other thing I do is I take a ruler and I draw a nice clean line along the bottom. So, and usually on the lower case, so that that is nice and clean. Nice, crisp, clean line. And I do that to all the pieces of the pattern so that the lettering has a line underneath it. I then take that same ruler and I come to my surface and I measure for the space that I want the lettering to fit into. And in this case, it's 3 inches from the top. So I measured down 3 inches on either side, and then I drew a chalk line directly across the surface at the 3-inch mark. And then I did the same thing 3 inches down. So I measured 3 inches from this line down for the next set of lettering to ensure that it is nice and straight. So that I have a line for each row of lettering. Then I take my line drawing, position it so that the line on the line drawing meets up with the line that I've put on my surface. And then I tape that line drawing in place. This ensures that my lettering is nice and straight. And I do the same thing with the second set, making sure that the two lines line up. And I tape that piece in place. And this way, you never run into the problem of having your lettering going uphill or downhill. Now, ordinarily, I use a metal ruler, but I can't seem to find mine. So I'm using white graphite. I'm going to slip it right underneath, like so. And I'm going to use one of my Uniball Signos. And again, I've talked about this before. This one has a nice stainless steel ball, and it's nice and fine, so you get really nice sharp edges, nice sharp and clear lines. Look what we found. We found my steel edge ruler. There's a reason why I use a steel edge ruler for almost everything. And this is it. If you use a plastic ruler, over time, they get chips out of them. And when you go to draw a straight line, those chips show up in your lines every single time. You don't get a crisp, clean transfer. So, this is what I do with my ruler. When you're doing lettering, there is vertical and horizontal lines in lettering. And wherever that vertical line is, or straight line is, I trace it with a straight edge ruler. And then the curved parts I do by hand. The curved parts aren't going to show up so much if they're a little irregular or not straight. But those vertical and horizontal lines will be very, very noticeable if they are not clean. So I use a straight edge ruler to ensure that they are. Just like that. And the end result is that your line drawings, your lettering, will be nice and clean where it matters most. And where it matters most is on those vertical and horizontal lines. Curves, not so much. Firm pressure, good sharp point. Again, that stainless steel thing. Rosie had a question about the chalk pencil I'm using. This is a sew line. This is actually a sewing tool, and it has a chalk point in it, but it also, if you give it a twist, it has a lead point, and another twist, it has a stylus. I just find this stylus is a bit too big for this type of work, but it's ideal if you're sewing. But I love that chalk line, and this is a sew line. These are available from Chris Hoy at cdwood.com. She has them, and so does Patty Rowlandson's site. You can find them there as well at creativeartslifestyle.com. So we will post the link for that after we're done here. This is a great tool. I have used this one for years, as you can tell, and it has never let me down, as this is a really handy tool to have. So there we go. We've got our short lettering done. So I will remove this. I want you to see how this looks. You see those great horizontal and straight lines? This is where my favorite eraser comes in. This is a Factus Black. It removes white graphite and chalk and whatnot fairly easily. So you can remove all of these other lines after the fact. So I'm using a number 2 rigger for my lettering. That's this one here. They're available from the Brush Guys. So I'm going to put... I'll show you what a difference that this makes, being able to trace your lettering on this way. And it's this. Once your brush is loaded up, having that ability to have those straight vertical lines makes all the difference in the world on how your artwork resolves, how it comes out in the end. It is almost impossible to paint a straight line when your lines aren't straight. If you take the time to make sure that all your vertical and your horizontal lines are clean and straight, your lettering will improve tenfold. The best paintbrush in the world is not going to give you nice looking lettering if you didn't put it on well in the first place. Number 2 rigger, best brush ever for painting lettering. Remember what I said about those, getting straight vertical lines. Okay, don't forget, ladies, we have a giveaway. We've got a set of those wonderful sponge daubers for you, and we have a gorgeous set of the Decorator series, the dome blenders and the small little deerfoot and that gorgeous mop. So one of you is going to have a wonderful prize. We also have 2 smaller little giveaways. We have a couple of stencils to give away too, so don't forget to comment and share the video, and that will automatically get you entered in that. So that's it. That's my tip for painting this gorgeous lettering. It's a simple technique. It's a simple thing to do. But when it comes to doing lettering, if you want it to look really, really great, make sure you have a good straight edge ruler and try this technique of measuring off and putting that line in. It will make all the difference. So get yourself a number 2 rigger. They're available at the Brush Guys, at brushguys.com. I know they have them in stock. I already checked so that you're not chasing your tail and looking for them. So we seem to have lost our upper camera. Okay. So the one that would show you me seems to have tanked out. So we won't be able to do the head-on shot, but we will do it this way. Thank you so much for joining me. So I showed you all of the techniques for creating this fun little wine cellar piece right here. Painting those grapes using that great little sponge dauber, using a number 2 rigger to create some fun lettering, and also a couple of tips for making sure that your lettering is nice and straight. Creating that fun stenciled background, it really isn't difficult. You can create lots of fun things with that. It would look great for a Christmas piece with holly berries and whatnot. Also done with that dauber. You could do all kinds of fun things with it. So, other than a few finishing details, shading edges, shading corners, I don't think there's a whole lot else I can teach you for this piece. It's really straightforward. It is not difficult to paint at all. If you have any questions, don't be shy. Make sure you put your questions into the comment section. I will be more than happy to answer them. We will review them, and I will make sure that I answer as many questions as I possibly can. If you're looking for the pattern, it's available on the website at tracymoreau.com. The brushes are all available from the Brush Guys at thebrushguys.com. And of course, a big thank you to all my friends and cohorts at Dynasty Brush for their great donation of the brushes, and my friends and cohorts at decawart.com. Thank you so much for joining me today, guys. Have a happy 4th. I'll see you again soon.